and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Helen Leathers. Good morning, Helen. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am very, very well.
Good.
Raring to go with another podcast.
What are we talking about today then?
Today, I thought it'd be useful to return to the subject of neurodiversity, which is a topic we obviously introduced back in episode 146. God, 146 episodes. Oh, sounds like a lot.
It does sound like a lot.
We're to our 160s now.
Here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
So today we're going to take it on a little bit further. We're going to go a little bit deeper and focus on one particular aspect of neurodivergence, which is ADHD.
Okay.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which we did talk a little bit about in 146, but I think it would be useful to go a bit deeper, try to reflect on it from a coaching perspective. I'm not sure how far we're going to get today. I said that at the beginning of the last episode about neurodiversity, and I think it is one of those topics that we can go in all sorts of directions. So we'll have a conversation, see where it goes. We might need a further conversation after this one.
Very big topics, aren't they? So we know, we mentioned this last time, we know from experience this can be quite an emotive topic, and a topic that people have strong opinions about that are often shared on social media.
Yes, so as we said on the last podcast, we're going to approach the conversation with care, curiosity, respect. We're not trying to offend anyone. So there are things that we will have our views on the topic, and there's some terminology that gets used that sometimes isn't helpful. So we'll do our best to keep it safe and allow everyone to enjoy it. So maybe just useful to recap on the terminology that we explored in the last episode. So neurodiversity is something that is all of us. So it recognizes those individual differences that exist across the population of any group of people, and the fact that their own neurological makeup will be unique. So my neurological makeup is different to your neurological makeup. So that is neurodiversity. Mm-hmm. So neurodiversity exists among all of us. So there's no point in us saying, I am neurodiverse. I think some people will, but it's not particularly helpful because we all are.
Because we all are.
And I think if you are neurodivergent and say, I am neurodiverse, you might well get the answer from someone else. Yes, so am I. We all are. That's the thing. So I think being particular about the terminology is useful for everyone. So then that does take us on to neurodivergence, and there are a number of different neurodivergences. So obviously a neurodivergence is something that can be diagnosed and categorized, and is something that is different from the neuromajority, or what sometimes referred to as people that are neurotypical. Having said we're all different, there are some commonalities that make the majority of the population neurotypical. So autism is a neurodivergence, as is ADHD, as is dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. So there are a number of conditions that would fall into that umbrella term of neurodivergence. So when someone says that they're neurodivergent, they're identifying themselves as having one of those recognized neurodivergences. They might not have been officially diagnosed as having a neurodivergent, but that doesn't mean that they don't have one. So there's a lot of undiagnosed neurodivergence out there. So I find it tricky. And again, everyone is going to refer to the way they see themselves. They're going to identify in a particular way. But I find it tricky in conversation when someone says, I am neurodivergent, because it doesn't really give me enough information. As someone on the receiving end of that conversation, hearing that statement, I'm then curious. And I kind of want to go, okay, which one? What have you got?
What does it mean?
What you got for me? What does it mean? But I think this is where we get into people saying, well, this is how I represent my neurodivergence. And you have to respect that I am telling you this in my own way. So I am respectful of that. So someone said to me the other day, "Oh, I'm neurodivergent," and I did say, "Yes, I am too," because I am. But neither of us shared what that neurodivergence was, and it felt like a bit of an incomplete conversation. That I was left thinking, well, I think I know what neurodivergence you have, but because we've had conversations in the past. So I think, whilst I fully respect that people may not feel safe to share their neurodivergence in normal conversation, they might just want to put it out there that they are neurodivergent. I think if we were in the coaching room, we would want to explore further. We wouldn't be saying, "Oh, so what type of neurodivergence have you got?" But we might be asking them questions that would allow them to speak further about their particular neurodivergence in terms of, how will I best support you?
Yeah. Because we need to know that in the coaching
We do,
space.
yeah. So if someone has autism, that is completely different to someone that has ADHD. But they might both describe themselves as being neurodivergent, which is absolutely fine, but not particularly helpful when we're trying to support them.
And equally, someone with dyslexia, that's not necessarily going to be an issue in the coaching space because we're talking.
But it could be an issue in terms of what they're talking about.
Exactly.
So they might be encountering problems in the workplace because they have dyslexia, and they might need to self-advocate for additional support and things like that. So I think it is useful to know.
Yes.
And I think for maybe for employers as well. And again, in trying to be respectful to the way that people want to communicate how they are and how they experience life, I think it's difficult for employers if someone says, "Well, I'm neurodivergent." Oh, okay, but what do I do about that? How do I support you? I think that there has to be the conversation has to go further, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. That's just the starting point, isn't it?
And I think it's further complicated by the fact that there may be that intersectionality that they might have more than one neurodivergence. So it's possible for someone to have ADHD and autism, sometimes described as ADHD. So there may be different things that people have that they might not just be able to simply say, "Oh, I've got ADHD." Yeah, it's more complex, isn't it? So probably the most useful question to ask in the coaching room is, what's most helpful for me to understand about how you experience things?
Yeah. That's a good question.
And that allows them to talk about it more freely, doesn't it?
So that's really good guidance there in starting to approach that topic. But you've chosen today to focus on ADHD. So why ADHD this week?
Well, a couple of reasons. So one's quite personal, and one is more about the direction of travel for a wider recognition of ADHD in the world. And I think it's becoming something that we will encounter more and more in the coaching room. So the current estimate is that 3.5% of the UK population have ADHD. And there are some estimates in the United States that it could be as high as 1 in 10 people with ADHD. So there's a lot of it about.
Yeah,
and
that's a
when
lot.
we think about autism, that roughly represents 1% of the population. So I think we're just going to encounter ADHD a lot more.
So there's a discussion to be had about it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So if we recap on some of the basic history of the topic, ADHD was first introduced to the world as a recognised condition in 1987. And before that had been referred to as hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. So it's very much seen as a childhood condition. So from 1994, it began to be used as a blanket condition that also covered ADD, Attention Deficit Disorder. So prior to that 1994 date, ADD was seen as something different. And that's someone that didn't have the hyperactivity element of ADHD. So now ADHD is split into 3 subtypes. So someone might have the hyperactivity and attention deficit traits. So that would be a combined type of ADHD. And then we have predominantly inattentive type or predominantly hyperactive impulsive type. So someone might be diagnosed with either of those or both. They're combined. So again, that makes it tricky with working with someone with ADHD to know how they experience life. And I think, again, that's important to recognize within the coaching context, because it may be that someone says they've got ADHD and you're expecting them not be able to sit still and want to get up and leave the room, when actually if they've got the predominantly inattentive type, that's probably not going to be a thing at all.
So useful to understand.
Yeah.
And you said at the start that you had 2 reasons for wishing to talk about it. One was the rise of awareness in the condition, and the other was a personal reason. So tell me about personal reason. Yeah,
so I've just been on a bit of a journey with ADHD over the last year or so and evolved my thinking about it, partly because of the discussions I've been having with doctors, but also my own reflections on my experience. So there was a time not so long ago where I would have argued that a lot of people that are being diagnosed with ADHD, adult ADHD, are just ENFP personality types. So I'm an ENFP. I identify with a lot of the traits that get talked about in terms of ADHD. And I've been working with, so I see that, I think, oh yeah, that's a ENFP. And I've been working with MBTI and other personality profiling tools for over 15 years. So that's the lens that I looked at the world through and looked at people through. So for anyone not familiar with personality profiling and MBTI, if you were looking to find out your type, you take a psychometric test. So you'd answer 87 questions, and the results of that test would then provide you with an indication that you're one of 16 types. So I'm an ENFP, which means that I'm extroverted. So like to be around people, get my energy from being around people. I'm intuitive, so big picture concepts, ideas, don't really do detail, don't really like the practical. I wouldn't read an instruction manual. I'll just press buttons till it works.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I have a feeling preference. So very much make decisions based on emotions and gut feel, rather than sitting down and analysing a problem. So much more empathic, I guess. And I have a perceiving preference, which means I'm very much go with the flow, last minute, don't really do plans, don't really like plans, don't like other people planning for me. So that's me. And that, that sounds to me like someone with ADHD, that predominantly inattentive type. So that's the lens that I've been looking at people through for the last 15 years. So to say, when people start to say, oh yeah, I've got ADHD, I've gone, have you? Because you sound like you're an ENFP.
And we've always said I'm the same profile, and we've always said that, the minute someone looked at us, they would probably see ADHD.
Yes, potentially. So that was a bit of a challenge, because I was having conversations with people saying, well, I think you're just an ENFP. And obviously, if you've been diagnosed with ADHD, that's a bit dismissive of your diagnosis. Well, it's very dismissive of your diagnosis. Yeah. And people were, well, I've been diagnosed. This is a thing. It's real. So I've stopped saying that. So, but just going back to the MBTI. So the opposite of my type and your type is ISTJ. So that's different on every dimension. So introverted, sensing, which is detail, practical stuff. Very much about drilling down. Thinking, so logical, analysis, making decisions after considering the pros and cons, all of that lovely stuff. And then judging, which is about planning, being organized, or liking things to be ordered. So the complete opposite. Now, I don't think the introversion, extroversion thing matters too much. I don't think that's necessarily an indicator of ADHD. I think both extroversion and introversion would fit into that. That bit doesn't matter. And I think really more introverts are diagnosed with ADHD than extroverts, which is interesting. So that was my map of the world, and very much how I viewed people for a long, long time. So, and it's useful because it does recognise individual differences.
Yes.
It recognises diversity, and it's saying we are all different. And actually, within the workplace, we need to think about that.
And it's useful.
Yeah. Because people are going to show up in a different way, and useful for you to be able to understand how you are, and because they're a different type, how they are. So I think that's quite useful. And if we think about neurodivergence, when someone says I'm neurodivergent, and someone is neurotypical or part of the neuromajority, they don't have a framework for how they are. They just recognize that someone else is different. So I think in some ways the personality, I can't use it for neurodivergence, but I think in some ways it's helpful for people to be able to recognize that they have a way of being that is different to someone else's way of being, and both are fine. Both are of equal value within the workplace. We don't all have to be the same way. So obviously this exploration of being an ENFP and seeing myself in the traits that people were describing as part of their ADHD, I kind of thought, well, I was saying, well, I'm sure if I went to be diagnosed or had a consultation with a psychiatrist, they would tell me I'd got ADHD, because all the things you're saying are me. So I decided that I'd go and get a diagnosis, or not a diagnosis, but I would go and explore it and have a conversation. So I paid privately for to speak to a psychiatrist. So I had an hour and a half with a psychiatrist where they discussed my childhood and discussed how I show up in the world. So good hour and a half with a very nice man called Rahul, who just ran through, they've obviously got a format they run through. And at the end, he diagnosed me with ADHD, predominantly inattentive presentation. So I think what was interesting for me was he did ask me lots of questions that would have related to the hyperactive impulsive type of ADHD, which, I was very honest in the way I answered the questions. So that wasn't a thing. That didn't come up as, you don't have that. So very much, it was clear that I don't have the combined type, or I don't have that. I just have the inattentive type.
The throwing away of manuals type.
Yeah. Why would you waste time reading an instruction manual? So that was interesting. So that was back in December. And what I did find interesting was that as much as I was saying, well, I'm going to get diagnosed as ever, because I can see that those traits of being an ENFP kind of map across, really. So I felt a little bit vindicated. Like, yes, I was right. Hurrah. But what was really interesting was there was something about being diagnosed that made me feel a little bit less normal. So actually feeling like there was something wrong with me there, which was weird. And then I started to look back at sort of, because we had a conversation about how things have turned out in my life, looking back at the times when I've struggled and situations I've struggled with, that went, that explains it. In a way that I'd not really thought about being in it. I'm just in ENFP, so it was a weird thing to have going on in my head that, I'm inadequate in some way because I have ADHD.
Oh,
so that was an odd. I'm okay again now. I'm happy with it now, but at the time it was a little bit unsettling. And I think people do talk about that being diagnosed later in life can feel a little bit unsettling. And maybe something they don't want to say out loud for fear of judgment.
Yeah, maybe.
So I think before I knew about personality differences, I would have just beaten myself up about stuff that because I didn't focus on detail and I'd get things wrong because of that. I am quite inattentive, forgetful, do struggle to make plans, get bored very quickly. Do you know, I even get bored with doing stuff I really enjoy doing. I was talking to someone about golf the other day and saying whenever I played golf, 12 holes was enough for me. Playing 18 was like, it's not having fun playing golf, but 12, I'm done. And sometimes when I'm playing tennis, I'll play tennis for an hour and think, time to move on. Whereas, I'm enjoying what's going on, but So I think I had a strong inner critic and kind of that sense of living in a world where more was expected of me. My business life was very compliance driven at that time, and I'm really not. So that was a complete mismatch. I was married to an ISTJ, and I think, there was an expectation of more order and planning and reading instruction manuals, that sort of thing. So, I think learning about personality differences, I suddenly went, aha, we are all different. And actually, an ENFP living with an ISTJ is going to be tricky because you just do things differently. So that made sense to the world for me.
I was also an ENFP married to an ISTJ, so I understand that.
But what I did on the back of learning about personality types was actually change my environment, change the way that I live my life. I'm no longer married to an ISTJ, as you know.
Yes.
And I changed profession. I am now a coach, where actually I do have to pay attention. That's something I can do for an hour and a half. But the kind of compliance-driven stuff doesn't exist anymore. And that was kind of making my life hell in my previous existence. So I've now created a world in which it doesn't really matter if there's a typo on the screen. If, we've just run a conference where if I'd been presented, I don't run off a script. I'm just standing at the front talking, and Tom, your slides aren't moving behind you because I'm not that interested. I'm just talking to people. So I think I've managed to create a life in which it suits my personality. It suits that ENFP profile. And I don't do things that require a different way of being. I don't do a lot of them anyway. So now with
me do the spreadsheets.
I'll make you do the spreadsheets. Yeah. So, but now with my new shiny diagnosis of ADHD, I think it was odd to start thinking, well, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't just an ENFP, and there is some deficiency. So
where are you now with your thinking on this then?
So I think I'm just much more comfortable with my diagnosis. I did contemplate having some drugs, getting some medication for it, but I've kind of stepped away from that now. I think I just wanted to see what it would be like to try them and see how things, because
to have some focus.
Well, yeah, but people say, well, it just takes away the noise. And I don't know what that means, because I don't know how it is not to have the noise. But I don't know that I have noise. And I suppose only by taking it away would you realise what it was.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm kind of interested in that. A bit like interested in getting a diagnosis. I'm interested in taking drugs just to see what it's like. I don't feel like I need drugs, because I think I have a life that fits with the way that I am. But I am hoping to write a book. And I did think, well, I could do with some focus for writing my book.
Get the medication.
Maybe I
could
take some drugs just whilst I write my book. But I'm not in that space at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. But for the most part, I think I run a successful business. We work well together.
Yeah, and we're aware of the gaps.
Yeah. So I don't feel like I need the drugs, but I could recognise that if you were in an environment, say, for medics that have ADHD, they may well need medication to help them do the role they have to do. That could be a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that people shouldn't be medicated. I think that's absolutely fine if you need it to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Something else that was interesting in being diagnosed was that there weren't any questions about emotional regulation. Which is something that gets talked about a lot in terms of adult ADHD, where it's seen as a key component of ADHD for some people.
Being able to emotionally regulate?
Yeah. So not having emotional regulation is seen as problematic. So it's all to do with the executive function, that gets talked about a lot. So what was interesting for me is that no questions were asked about that.
Okay.
So in order to be diagnosed with ADHD, you don't have to have emotional dysregulation.
Right. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That it gets talked about, but it's not part of the diagnosis.
Yeah. So I think the historical diagnosis, the tool that is used to diagnose, was originally devised for children and was more focused on looking for problem behaviours rather than perhaps internal functioning. But there's been quite a bit of research done. There's a guy called Russell A. Barkley in the United States. He's a clinical psychologist who has this theory about ADHD that it's an inhibition self-regulation model. So that suggests that people with ADHD would struggle to regulate.
Okay.
So he's been quite influential in the last 10 years on the topic of ADHD. And I think a lot of what we see online is kind of based on his theories. So a lot of what people talk about in the way that people will show up with ADHD is related to his offerings. And I think there is some acceptance now that struggle with emotional regulation might be common for a lot of people with ADHD. But I think that there's still a lot of controversy about that. I don't think it's accepted by everyone. So there are other people that have different theories. They go, well, no, it's nothing to do with that. So I think it's tricky in that sense, because I think a lot of people that talk about ADHD will say this is fact, when I think it's an emerging area that no one's convinced about yet. So,
and it's suggesting perhaps then that people with ADHD aren't able to learn to emotionally regulate, which I don't know. You seem quite emotionally well regulated.
Do I?
So,
it's good to know.
And you're able to emotionally regulate. So maybe it is some kind of hangover from it being focused on children who haven't got the same skills to emotionally regulate. Maybe that's complicated and the situation.
But it could be that a lot of people that identify as struggling with emotional dysregulation have that as a separate element to their life that is nothing to do with ADHD.
Yeah.
It's just those people would go, well, I have ADHD and I can't do that, so that must mean that's part of ADHD. I say I don't think there's a hard and fast this is real. I think there are critics to his theory, and that is just kind of his theory. But I think maybe the kind of lived experience of people that are being diagnosed would suggest there is some correlation. But I don't think the research is quite there yet.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Yeah. And just going back to, and I think it might be useful actually in different episodes just to talk about the different theories that exist around it, because there are half a dozen different researchers that have different theories about ADHD and what the causes are and what the presentations are. So I think it might be useful to do an episode on that.
Okay.
So I was going to say, going back to the personality profiling and that crossover between the two. So there's nothing. I had this kind of pet theory that, well, all ENFPs are going to be diagnosed with ADHD. Now, I don't think that's true, but I think there is a big sort of correlation between the two. I say introversion, extroversion doesn't seem to matter too much. And I think more introverts are diagnosed with ADHD than extroverts. But if we strip that one away, there is more likelihood that you will be diagnosed with ADHD if you have an intuition preference rather than a sensing preference. More likelihood if you have a perceiving preference than a judging preference. So if you're big picture, concepts, ideas, you're more likely to be diagnosed. If you have that sensing, read the instruction manual, you're not. If you have the perceiving preference of being last minute, go with the flow, not really making plans, more likely to be diagnosed. If you have the judging preference, like organised, like things to be settled, like to keep to a plan, you're not as likely to be diagnosed. And if we think about this emotional regulation piece, if you have a feeling preference, again, I don't have evidence, but probably more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD because you have a feeling preference and you're not making decisions based on logical analysis. So someone with a thinking preference probably does regulate their emotions, but they're just probably not as emotional as someone with a feeling preference, probably not as empathetic. So I think those three dimensions together, NFP, whether you're E or I think would be an indicator that
it's likely that I
think you're more likely than an STJ to be diagnosed with ADHD.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's just interesting that where I started with this, all ENFPs have ADHD. That is obviously isn't true, but I think it's a good the NFP is a good indicator. And if we think that 6.3% of the UK population are ENFPs and 3.2% of the population are INFPs, that's 9.5% of the population.
About where they think that ADHD is.
And so the American statistics are around 10%. So if we kind of map that across, that kind of works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not putting it out there that all ENFPs are going to have ADHD and that all people with ADHD are going to be ENFPs. That's clearly not true. But I think my initial kind of thoughts on people that were saying, oh yeah, I think what I noticed was a lot of people that I'd done work with that were ENFPs were then getting a diagnosis of ADHD. And I was going, oh yeah, but you're just an ENFP. Mm-hmm. Whereas actually they're both. They are an ENFP and they have ADHD, as do I. I've been diagnosed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I just thought that was interesting. Yeah. I'm sure there will be people out there that disagree with me and find some objection to what I'm saying, but that's just my lived experience of kind of coming to this late in life and being diagnosed with something that I've never seen particularly as, I've seen the way I am as problematic for the environment I was existing in, and I've just changed my environment. I have a goodness of fit now for my environment. Yeah. In terms of the work I do, in terms of the person I live with, there's a good fit.
Yeah. That's good.
So yes.
So let's quickly think about the coaching room.
Let's not.
Oh, okay. Because you want to leave it there?
Yeah. So
we've gone on for long.
Obviously we talked about this, about how it might relate to the coaching room. And as is usual, we've talked about things in a way that doesn't leave us any real time to talk about the coaching room. So let's do another episode where we talk about ADHD in the coaching room, because I think it is going to be something useful for coaches to pay attention to.
Perfect. We shall do that going forward.
We'll adjourn.
We shall adjourn.
Get up again at another time.
Thank you for sharing your lived experience.
You're very welcome.
And that journey that you've been on. It's been an interesting one.
Yeah.
And thank you for your honesty and reflections on that.
What do we do next time, Helen?
Next time on the podcast, I thought we'd talk a little bit about health coaching and coaching.
Good. Yeah. Okay. I think we're engaged with both. So be interesting to offer our thoughts on the subject.
Yeah. A little bit of a comparison.
Yeah.
And a discussion. So I look forward to having that conversation with you.
Wonderful. See you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.